Hi, I'm John Delano, political editor, KDKA TV, CBS Pittsburgh. And our very special guest is Senator Bob Casey, the senior senator from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Senator, thank you, sir, as always, for taking time with me. I do appreciate it.
John, great to be with you. Thank you.
So let me ask you, since I haven't talked to you since last Wednesday, where were you on January 6th when all this happened at the U.S. Capitol?
I was in the Senate chamber, John. We were just beginning the debate on the first objection against the electoral votes for the state of Arizona. And right in the middle of a floor speech by Senator Lankford of Oklahoma, it became evident that something was wrong because you could see staffers going to Vice President Pence in the presiding officer's chair to get him off the rostrum, so to speak, and get him out of there. And at that moment, we knew something was wrong. Then in a few minutes, they stopped the proceedings, secured the room, locked all the doors. And by that time, you had the room flooded with Capitol police officers and other security officials, as well as staff. So now a room of a little more than 100 people became a room of probably 200 people. And I just assumed, I think naively, that whatever was happening in the hallways would be dealt with, and we'd have to sit there for a period of time, maybe a half an hour, and then we could go back to the proceeding. Everything changed about 15 minutes later, where they said we had to evacuate the chamber, and we know what happened since then. At that moment, which I felt was a moment where I felt myself at risk at that moment, because we knew at that time that there was gunfire and there could be people with firearms in the Capitol. But at that moment, I didn't realize how close they were. They were yards away from the Senate chamber, some of them armed. So, but the Capitol Police, I know there's a lot of debate about what they did not do in terms of preparation and the like. And there's certainly some accountability or culpability that we have to examine. But most of those Capitol Police officers, in my judgment, put themselves on the line, acted with a lot of valor to protect every single member of Congress. I think it's pretty remarkable that not a single member of Congress was seriously injured, killed, or captured. And that's pretty difficult to do when you have 535 people you have to protect.
Did you have any damage to anything of yours? You have a desk there at in the Senate chamber, and we know that the insurrectionists got inside the Senate chamber.
Yeah.
Did anything happen to any of your belongings or possessions?
No, and I think that was probably true of most of the desks. I know some might have been vandalized. I think the real problem came with some of the offices for the staff. The parliamentarian's office and I think a few others were kind of ransacked. But it seems like they spent a lot of time in Speaker Pelosi's office. But John, what was particularly disturbing, we all knew that a lot of these folks who came to terrorize the Capitol were against the Speaker, wanted to bring their point of view to the Speaker or worse. But what was particularly surprising, I think, for a lot of Americans is within just a few short days, the president was able to radicalize a group of Americans to march into the Capitol and cause all the destruction we saw and to threaten people. But a large segment of those folks coming into the Capitol were saying, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." That radicalization against Mike Pence happened over the course of just a few days. The president wasn't talking about Mike Pence in October, November, and December. He was talking about him just for a few days. That shows the power of the incitement that the president brought to bear on this horrific chapter in American history.
Well, let's talk about accountability, because I think that's where there's a lot of focus. You issued a statement last night with respect to this. How should America and the Congress hold President Trump accountable?
Well, I think the most expeditious way, now that we know that the vice president is unlikely to invoke or operationalize the 25th Amendment, We know that the president is not going to resign. I think to remove the danger that he poses to the country, and not just in a theoretical constitutional danger, which he obviously poses, but the danger he poses by further incitement. The best route to do that, of course, is impeachment and removal. The removal part gets more complicated because by the time this impeachment measure would get to the Senate, there'd be very few hours left in his administration, and that a lot of questions arise about what best, what should we do at that moment. But I think impeachment is important. You have to have some sanction by at least half of the Congress that condemns the actions of the president, and at least take steps in the direction of having him removed from office.
But as you know, Senator, there are a lot of Americans, particularly Trump supporters, who say this is a waste of time. He's going to be out of office in just a few days. Why go through this exercise? What's your response to them?
Well, the worry is that this is a president who has crossed every line. Every time we thought there was a line he would not cross, he has crossed it. And I've heard Republican politicians for years saying, oh, he won't do that, or he doesn't really mean that, or the like. Well, we saw what happened. We almost had a decapitation of the one branch of government, the legislative branch, and part of the executive branch by if they're able to get their hands on Mike Pence. So that idea that he won't cross any more lines is really a joke. He will, and he's only got a few days, but he can do a lot of damage in a few days. And he does have access to nuclear weapons. And I don't say that to be incendiary or dramatic, because he seems, whenever he's in a corner, he not only lashes out, but he seems to want to change the subject or distract people by taking another action. And when you have a president with the power this president has, not only to incite violence, but the power he has in terms of his control of our national security, that has to be of grave concern. So hours and days matter.
As you know, the president has some, what others have called enablers. Your colleagues, some of your colleagues in the US Senate, and certainly a whole lot of members of the US House of Representatives, including 8 out of 9 Republican members of Congress from Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Is there any degree of responsibility on them? And what should the accountability be for their own acts?
John, at a minimum, and I'll speak to the Senate in particular, but I think this applies to the House, although they've got procedures they have to follow. But in the Senate, at a minimum, those who supported this effort to overturn the results of a presidential election based upon a lie, a total abject falsehood that was meant to not just mislead, but mislead and incite people to take the action they took this past week, which is an act of violence and terrorism. But because of that, there has to be, at a minimum, for senators who voted that way, censure. What I don't know yet, and I'm still looking at this, is whether expulsion is warranted as well for some members of the Senate. But at a minimum, for senators and House members who voted this way, there should be some kind of censure.
And that would include the members of the House from Pennsylvania who voted to invalidate Pennsylvania's electoral vote?
I would agree with that. I just don't know if there's a different censure process or if there's a different process in the House. I do know this: in the history of the United States Senate, I think that I counted right, there have been about 9 instances of censure. The only time when there was a large number in the Senate of expulsions was in the aftermath of the secession of states from the Union in 1861 and 62. Every senator who represented those states that succeeded was expelled. But in terms of censure, it is rare. But I think that's the minimum, because we have to send a direct message, not only to the next authoritarian president, if there is one in the future, we have to expect there will be, but also to those members of Congress that support an effort to overturn the election based upon a lie, that there's going to be a consequence for your actions. Now, just because I disagree with a Republican on tax policy or cuts to Medicaid or cuts to the SNAP program or things like that, those kinds of disagreements don't warrant censure. But when you directly oppose the Constitution and you incite or take actions which lead to an insurrection, there has to be a consequence. Now, there's a 14th Amendment provision that some want to invoke, and we're taking a look at that. But at a bare minimum, there should be a censure, which is a condemnation of the actions of a legislator.
Do you think these members violated their oath of office?
I think they did. And when Mitch McConnell, with whom I've disagreed with on hundreds of issues, when Mitch McConnell says, as the leader of the Republican Party in the whole Congress, he's the highest ranking Republican, when he said his vote against the objection was the most important vote of his more than 30-year career in about 35 or 36 years now, that was the most important vote of his career, you know that it is a matter of great consequence.
Finally, Senator, let me ask you, what is your advice to the House members from Pennsylvania who were part of this effort to overturn Pennsylvania's electoral vote?
Well, I hope that with censure or with the condemnation of their constituents and otherwise, that they would never engage in this kind of activity again. Because, John, there are only two choices here, and there wasn't a third option. This idea that they were just supporting an audit of the election is a lot of BS. There are two choices. The Constitution and democracy is choice number one. Choice number two was support the lie that the president was invented and what he was perpetuating. And they chose to support a politician lying to the American people over and over again about the election, over the Constitution. And when you take that oath, you take an oath to the Constitution, not to a man and not to a political party.
Well, Senator Bob Casey, it's always a pleasure to be with you, sir. Thank you very much for your time today. I do appreciate it.
John, thank you.
We have some cloudy skies still fighting over Pittsburgh, so it's going to be one of those nights.